the 28th, which just posted out there now. Thank you. All right, great. Let's see. And we're going to start with item C, communication. This is an opportunity for the public to speak to the planning group on any subject matter within our jurisdiction that is not on the posted agenda. I see a hand up from a telephone caller. And if that person would go ahead for 2 minutes, please. Oh, what is the command on the phone for them to go to?
*9.
*9 for your phone.
It looks like they were unmuted and then they unmuted themselves, or they muted themselves again. So caller, you want to dial *9. There you go.
Yeah.
You're unmuted now.
Thank
Okay,
you,
can you hear me now?
Sure.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I was trying to get online on the link, but my link isn't working. So I apologize for calling.
Well, that's quite all right. Your name, please?
Okay, excuse me. My name is Terry Ann Skelly. And I came tonight as a county resident to report on 2 Board of Supervisors meetings held last week, one on Tuesday and one on Wednesday. There was a final reading on a proposed county marijuana tax ordinance, which means this tax measure will go on the November ballot for a vote. And many of us oppose this measure because it presumes unfairly that residents want more marijuana storefronts than the 5 we already have. Many of us do not, especially parents like myself. Yet we've had little voice in the proposed expansion of marijuana businesses in the unincorporated areas. This is being advanced by 3 county supervisors with little to no attention to constituents' opposition. One of our concerns is that residents not be misled by erroneous arguments that tax revenues can compensate for the widespread negative health and social outcomes of marijuana businesses in our neighborhoods. Marijuana tax revenues will go into the general fund, where the Board of Supervisors can use them any way they please. There are no guidelines in this proposal to allot tax revenues for use and public education or information regarding the harms of marijuana use. The bottom line is that even when tax measures are passed, the cities have difficulties collecting the taxes. In the city of San Diego, the city auditor recently reported that half of marijuana businesses were not paying their taxes. And further still, the cities don't have sufficient enforcement to go and collect those taxes. I thought you should be aware. Thank you.
Ma'am, can I get you to spell your first and last name for me?
Yes. Terry, Terri, Skelly, Skelly.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Now, do we have any other speakers from the public or the group as far as public communication? Doesn't look like it. Anyone else? And I think that phone number up there was Terry's. Okay, so let's go on to the action items. Jacob Armstrong is here tonight. He's the chief of the Land Development Services Group in PDS. Jacob, I don't think, is Damon with us tonight too?
No, Damon is not. It'll just be myself tonight.
Okay, great. And you're going to present and correct me if I'm wrong on my terminology, specifics of infill as it relates to the Spring Valley planning area. The Board of Supervisors has provided direction to establish infill areas where no VMT analysis or mitigation would be required. I provided a link for anyone who is interested in the agenda. It's an introduction to SB 743 and also on changes on how the county analyzes traffic impacts. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Do you have something to share on the screen?
I do. I have just a brief presentation. I'll see if I can share that.
Yeah, I've gone ahead and stopped my share.
Okay, great. Let me see if I can pull that up. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Yep, looks good.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all very much for the opportunity to come out to your group this evening and give a very quick overview of kind of what's going on at the county with vehicle miles traveled. Just to kind of let the group know where we are and why we're going through an outreach right now is we are going to our planning commission next Friday on July 22nd. And this is for us to bring to the board on August 17th, a updated revised transportation study guide. It's been quite a journey over the last couple of years since the SB 743 and the law required local jurisdictions to start using vehicle miles traveled as the metric for CEQA for transportation. And over the last 2 years, we've gotten a lot of direction from our board. And so where we're at right now is kind of a culmination of that direction over the last 2 years. And ultimately on August 17th, the board could adopt a new transportation study guide, which becomes the county's threshold for transportation analysis using VMT as the metric. And part of that is the infill analysis, which was part of the board direction. So that's kind of part of VMT. And really what VMT is kind of a roadmap, if you will, for development feasibility. And that's why it's garnered so much attention, both in the county and statewide. So with that, I have a very brief presentation. It's just a few slides because I know this is a kind of an esoteric subject for a lot of folks, and hopefully people have kind of been following the county the last couple of years because there's been a lot of presentations to the board. I think we've gone 4 or 5 times over the last couple of years. But again, ultimately, it's to bring to the board this transportation study guide for adoption. So I'll start with a couple quick background slides, and then I tailor this presentation more specifically to Spring Valley. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. A little bit of background. So Senate Bill 743 or SB 743 was signed into law in 2013, and it required a change to how local jurisdictions analyze transportation impacts under CEQA. Each jurisdiction was required to make that change by July 1st of 2020. The intent of SB 743 was to balance the needs of managing traffic congestion with statewide goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, encourage infill development, and improve public health through more active transportation like walking and biking. So while VMT is used to evaluate transportation impacts under CEQA, it plays a critical role in land use planning, as it can also affect the jurisdiction's ability to achieve other state goals and requirements related to housing. A challenge with VMT implementation is how to implement VMT as recommended by the state while meeting other state requirements for housing, since VMT will make it more costly and challenging to develop within most of the unincorporated area. This is because more than 97% of the unincorporated area is located in a VMT inefficient area based on guidance from the State Office of Planning and Research, or OPR. For projects proposed outside VMT efficient areas, it becomes challenging and costly to mitigate VMT and may be cost prohibitive, ultimately reducing the number of projects that move forward. If a property is located in a VMT inefficient area, there is often a need to prepare an environmental impact report, an EIR, which can be lengthy and costly. Often at the end of the process, the costs associated with mitigating for VMT make it cost prohibitive to develop the property based on current market rates. So this is kind of a summary of the journey that we've been on the last couple of years. In June of 2020, the board adopted a transportation study guide, or TSG as we refer to it, to implement SB 743 and VMT in the unincorporated area. In September of 2020, the Cleveland National Forest Foundation, Coastal Environmental Rights Foundation, and Sierra Club filed suit alleging the adoption of the TSG violated CEQA and SB 743. In May of 2021, the board received information on how VMT implementation was progressing and options for potential updates to the TSG. The board directed staff to explore 13 items related to VMT and returned to the board with options for consideration. In June of 2021, OPR updated their frequently asked questions on their website to clarify how a region is defined for the purposes of analyzing VMT in an unincorporated area. The region includes the entire San Diego region, not just the unincorporated area. In September of 2021, the board rescinded the TSG, which relied on an unincorporated area average when analyzing VMT. Without an adopted TSG, projects are currently on their own to determine how they want to analyze VMT, including providing the substantial evidence to support any findings of less than significant impacts. And as I mentioned, in August next month, the county board will consider the adoption of a revised TSG. So I'm going to share a few maps and this kind of helps explain VMT. VMT is very much about location. So this slide represents VMT efficient areas in the unincorporated county based on that regional threshold of 15% and 15% below, which is what OPR recommended. And this is based on using the Sandag travel demand model as the tool. So looking at these areas, and now we went through an exercise of housing capacity within these VMT efficient areas, and the overall housing capacity with this new Sandag model, which was recently updated, which is utilized for the revised TSG, is around 2,160 housing units based on the current general plan remaining housing capacity. So focusing on Spring Valley, there's one small area, as you can see, the little area right there that is efficient, VMT efficient, which has a capacity of 17 dwelling units within that area, Spring Valley. So in addition to VMT efficient areas, the board selected an option to also include infill and infill village areas where transit is most feasible, excluding high and very high fire hazard areas. This option equates to about 6.8% of the general plan housing capacity and 3,940 housing units countywide. Again, looking at the Spring Valley Village area, there's a capacity for 698 dwelling units within the infill transit village areas. When combining the VMT efficient areas and board directed option of infill transit village areas, excluding high and very high fire hazard areas, this amounts to about 10.1% of the general plan housing capacity and 5,870 housing units. For the Spring Valley, the number does not change from the 698 within the village area because the VMT efficient area is within the village boundary. These areas and units depicted on this slide represent the total areas by geographic location that have been incorporated into the new transportation study guide for VMT, whereby development projects located within these areas could move forward without VMT analysis or mitigation, although other CEQA subjects like air quality, cultural resources, biology, etc., would still need to be considered. If the board adopts a new TSG next month, projects would be able to move forward if they meet any of the following criteria. The project is located within a VMT efficient area based on 15% below a regional average. The project generates less than 110 average daily trips, which equates to about 11 single family dwelling units. The project includes 100% affordable housing. The project is located a half mile from a transit priority area. The project results in redevelopment that lowers VMT. The project is locally serving public facility like a fire station or retail of less than 50,000 square feet in size, or if the project is located within the infill transit village areas, excluding the high and very high fire. A project that meets any of these criteria would not have to do a VMT analysis or mitigation. Again, project would still be required to go through the environmental review process as required by CEQA, but no additional analysis would be needed for VMT. So as I mentioned, we are going to Planning Commission next Friday, and then we are going to the board on August 17th. And again, the board meeting will be an action item for the board to consider adoption of transportation study guide. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I can leave it open for any questions. Thank you.
I think Lori, you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Could you put that picture up of the Spring Valley Planning Group area? Because it looks to me like you've put, okay, all that purple is pretty much Dictionary Hill, which is pretty much straight up and down. And the lower part of it is already commercial. Everything's built there. You're just saying to tear down the blighted homes and build thousands of blighted apartments. Is that the plan?
So this doesn't get into other policies of the county related to housing, such as the county considering potential redevelopment, rezoning, upzoning, zoning overlays. All of that is part of a larger effort that's called, it's referred to as the Sustainable Land Use Framework. And
Well, uh, Spring Valley is blighted because of the county's policies.
yes, so this is just
Yeah.
CEQA analysis. If a project is VMT efficient or within these other screening criteria I mentioned, such as infill. And the reason we identified infill, because that was really the intent of the legislation, was to incentivize and streamline development within these infill areas that could potentially be served by transit, other modes besides your vehicle. And so what we're identifying is that these are areas that have the density to qualify as infill. We're not saying these are the areas that the county is going to propose or incentivize development. Those things are going to be discussed, considered, as part of future efforts, outreach, potentially general plan updates, all of those things. We're just telling the Board of Supervisors that these areas, if a project was to move forward, would not be subject to a CEQA analysis for VMT, because it already has these levels of density within these areas.
Are there any criteria by which a developer isn't going to automatically be able to increase density and as a result blight? Because all along the freeway, there's already 4 highly dense apartment buildings, and there's one area where there are some nice houses. I'm assuming you'll have a developer buy up all those nice houses and turn those into blighted apartment buildings. Is that the policy?
So a developer could certainly purchase any vacant parcels, and one of the other aspects of the next part
We're
of the,
talking only about vacant parcels, because I don't think those are vacant parcels.
no, there's not many. We did a parcel level analysis of looking at all vacant parcels based on the assessor's office. We also looked at parcels that could be identified as redevelopment, where you do a land to value ratio and you kind of come up, and we did that, but that's part of a larger effort. And for the most part, there's not a lot of vacant parcels and there's not a lot of redevelopment, but that's, again, all going to be part of kind of this larger analysis of what are the real opportunities within these areas. And that's going to be studied further over the next couple of years. And to answer your question, right now, a developer would still have to go through whatever current zoning is identified. If they deviate, they would have to go through the normal process of a general plan amendment and go through that normal process. So this hasn't changed anything as far as zoning or anything along those lines. This is simply just.
The county automatically approves any increase in density in Spring Valley. We've never gotten the densities we've wanted. So, I mean, this is like just saying, well, they're going to have carte blanche, so live with it. But also up in the northwestern area, there was a little yellow piece. And is that along Bancroft Drive? And was that the blighted, because that's all an old school and pretty much light industrial. So you're going to completely, again, mix up all of the zoning in Spring Valley, because we're very badly zoned right now, because we have a lot of residential in heavy industry. We have residential in light industry. We have all kinds of things next to each other, which showed there was never any kind of plan to help Spring Valley. So is this just going to be the same? Only you're going to make it denser?
Again, this has nothing to do with zoning at all. This has to do with this area. This area in yellow is identified as a VMT efficient area, which means based on how far people are driving within this, and they refer to these little geographic zones as traffic analysis zones in the model. What it's saying is within this area, people are driving less than 16 miles on average a day that live and work in this area. Therefore, they're below a threshold.
That's the only spot where people are driving less than that?
In the Spring Valley area, correct? Yes.
Really?
Not surprised.
You wonder how they determine that.
Yeah, because that's right by the freeway, and we know what a miserable nightmare that is, because the county and the state totally boned us on that.
Yeah, it's, I know people hate hearing about the sand egg model, because it's this big thing that it's really hard to explain, and I know it there's a lot of folks that have a lot of questions about the model, but from the standpoint of looking at travel demand, origin, destination, where people are going, it is the best tool as a resource. So that's what we used. And what the model does is it takes social economic data and all of those things and these little traffic analysis zones, and then it basically identifies where people are coming and going throughout the day based on, you know, these origin destinations and different land uses and job and work. And it takes all this criteria and basically comes up with an average. And from a CEQA standpoint, all we're looking at is if that average is below or above that threshold. And if it's below, meaning people are driving less distances than the average, then it would be considered VMT efficient. And this particular area was one of them. You can see there's not a lot of areas in the unincorporated county. But
Yeah,
this-
that's kind of insane, and I think it's really disingenuous for that particular idea. But in order to even get to a trolley stop, we have to either go on the freeway in that horrible interchange between 125 and 94, or take 5 or 6 different surface roads to get over to La Mesa. There's never been any proposal to put any kind of trolley service out here for us, and say down in Bonita and such. But I don't understand why all of a sudden there's this wonderful idea that, what is this, almost 600 units to go around Spring Valley area? I think that's a little bit
Correct.
bad. Done, sir. Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to send you out to La Jolla Town Center.
Chris Pierce, please.
Over there, let's put some there.
So if this VMT efficient area wasn't in Spring Valley, we wouldn't qualify for any of these planned housing?
Bloody too good.
Or if it qualified for the infill. So this VMT is one metric, and this metric is using the model and just figuring out how on average how far people are driving within these geographic areas. The other metric, which is where the board directed us, is to look at what areas have certain levels of density. And what we did is we looked at household density and certain criteria that defines urban. We looked at intersection density, how many intersections within a certain area, job accessibility. We looked at all these different metrics for how to define infill. And then we basically used the model based on that criteria to see which areas would meet that criteria. And if they checked all those boxes, it was identified as one of these infill areas that is in blue. And then if one of these infill areas are also located within a village, in the entire village area, because the land use characteristics would be very similar, the board directed us to also include the village area, where if just one of those blue traffic analysis zones land in a village, we included the entire village as well.
So is Rancho Santa Fe going to have the same metric?
If they meets the criteria, any place in the unincorporated county that met this criteria would be identified as infill.
How do we challenge the metrics that were used to determine that a school and a bunch of businesses were not used that much travel? Because I mean,
so in our transportation study guide that's on that link to the website, you can go on our website and there's a lot of other information on there, but there's a couple things I'll mention. One is there's a link to a GIS web map, which allows, because these maps are pretty high level and you can't really focus in, but we have a web tool that allows you to go in and zoom into specific areas, and it has the same kind of geographic areas, infill, VMT efficient, but you can go all the way down to a parcel level and you can click on it. It basically tells you if you're an infill, VMT efficient. It tells you how many average miles for that particular parcel that people are driving. And so that gives you more of a granular kind of, if you want to kind of look and get into more specifics, it has aerial imagery on top of it too. And then if also in our transportation study guide, we provided all the substantial evidence for our analysis. There's several technical memorandums that are part of the transportation study guide that basically explains everything that was included as part of our analysis. It's all the citations, all the technical data, everything is there, and you could certainly go through all of that. And that will give you at least an idea of the analysis that went into identifying these areas.
And so how does that little teeny sliver of saying that that area is efficient make you be able to infill the rest of the area?
That's
And I'm sorry, what sliver are you referring to?
That yellow sliver,
Going back to
that
that.
you're saying that's the
So-
only VMT efficient area in Spring Valley. So then that gives you justification to infill all of the areas around Spring Valley?
No, the VMT efficient is completely separate from the infill. It's a completely different analysis, completely different methodology. It's just two different ways to analyze VMT to meet the intent of the legislation. The VMT efficient areas is strictly a modeling exercise of going through the model and how far people are driving on average. The infill exercise is the exercise where we're not looking at how far people are driving on average. We were looking at what areas already have existing density to levels that we could define as infill, and then define those areas based on that criteria. And if you meet that certain level of density and infill within a village, then the entire village was also captured. So two completely separate methodologies.
But you're trying to increase the density in those infill areas.
No,
No.
all we're saying is there's density that exists now.
So
Every
the mixture of
what's the-
apartments and housing, the mixture of housing means.
Are
that
are we
smaller-
going by hands? Are we going by hands?
I
People have their
apologize,
hands up.
sir.
My last question was, it says like 600 and something housing units that could be added, right? Is that not adding density?
No, it's what that is. It's from our housing portal on our county website, which takes a look at our general plan remaining housing capacity, which is almost 60,000 units. And what this exercise does, it looks at these areas that are identified as VMT efficient or infill, and it's basically saying what is the remaining capacity for potential housing within these areas. It's not saying that this is where we're going to add more density or change zoning. All it's saying is what's there now, there's a capacity for 600 and something dwelling units within that area existing.
What does this whole exercise help Spring Valley do?
So this exercise, as I mentioned, this is because VMT is related to CEQA, and because CEQA is looking at existing conditions when a development project wants to move forward and they have a proposal for their development, they're going to have to look at VMT, where they're located, how large the project is, those other screening criteria. And then they're going to have to identify, are they going to be subject to VMT? And if they are, then they're going to be required to do an environmental impact. They may be a 16 unit apartment or a condo that because the size of that, which is fairly small project, but it's greater than the small project screening. If it's not located in one of these areas, a 15 unit condo or apartment would be required to do an EIR if it doesn't land in with one of these areas, and most likely would not be able to mitigate, because VMT is very, very, very difficult to mitigate from a feasibility and cost standpoint. So they would still be subject to what's called a statement of overriding considerations, which would still require the board to ultimately approve the project, despite the fact the project would still have VMT impacts that are unmitigated. And so what it does is it creates kind of from a development standpoint, it kind of develops that roadmap for where would projects be feasible or where would projects not be feasible to build in the unincorporated county. And so this creates that environmental base map. And then from here, decision makers can say, well, what do we want to do now? This is CEQA. Now, the question is, what do we do now is, where does the county want to focus and incentivize development, where they want to make the development more challenging? CEQA has kind of done the challenging part for jurisdictions around the state. Now the question is, where does the county want to develop policies, plans to still meet some levels of housing capacity? And does this provide somewhat of a roadmap to start developing those policies? And that's kind of where the county is right now.
Thank you.
Jim Cousteau, please.
Yeah, thank you. I can see this as, we're kind of ground zero on infill and dramatic increase in density. I forget the Senate bills, but Lorena Gonzalez and Tony Atkins and others ran some bills through the legislature that are going to allow dramatic increases in density on heretofore single-family dwelling parcels. And this, to me, is just another nail in the coffin, if you will, to take away any disincentive from developers, because they're not going to have to do a VMT study, it sounds like, in pretty much all of Spring Valley. So I'm very concerned about that, and primarily because the county has done little, if anything, to address the traffic issues within our community. Sandag has got this big bet, whatever the executive director is trying to push on us to do this crazy high-speed rail and transit push, and I see that as going nowhere fast. I don't think people are going to support the gigantic increase in taxes it'll take to fund that. So where does that bring us? That brings us back to having to improve our freeways, and particularly the 94 east and west and 125 interchange, other surface street issues within our community. The Bancroft on and off ramp to the freeway is extremely under designed for the quantity of traffic that is going through there. The Hamishaw Road on and off ramp to the 125 and Sweetwater Road, that's just a nightmare already, and it's only going to get worse. I see this as being nothing but trouble for our community. We're ground zero in terms, and I understand why. It's because we're close to the center part of the city, and so we sort of get the dirty end of the stick, if you will. Very concerned with this. I see it as just, like I said, the next nail in the coffin that's going to really dramatically increase the density within our community in ways that people that have single family homes are not going to be happy. I can see the writing on the wall, and I know you're just the messenger. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, but I see this as being very problematic long term. Is there any discussion in all this exercise that you guys are doing about how you plan to improve the traffic flows and capacity of all the roadways? Because if you don't do that as part of this discussion, it's completely egregious.
Yeah. To answer your question, and I know this whole VMT thing is very interesting. I've been involved in this for over a decade, and it just seems weird that from a transportation standpoint, you could literally build a 100-story tower and not have a transportation impact if you're within one of these areas, which just doesn't seem to make sense. But in the VMT world, what it's trying to accomplish is that you would not be driving within these areas. You would have other options. With that being said, there is a lot of jurisdictions around the state that have said, well, look, VMT is not spot analysis. It's just kind of this geographic, how far people are driving on average. And so a lot of jurisdictions have done kind of two parts of traffic analysis. There's the VMT, which is CEQA, and then some jurisdictions like the county, as part of our transportation study guide, developed what we refer to as a local mobility analysis, or an LMA. And that's where if there's a land development project that's going through discretionary review, we still have the county, based on our planning, police powers and conditioning, still have the ability to review those projects, go through a traffic analysis, determine what road improvements may be needed, and condition those improvements as part of the project discretionary entitlement. So we still have that ability to do that, except it's completely outside of CEQA, and it's just part of the planning process now. And because there's also a lot of folks around the state have tried to find the right balance, because now you're kind of adding one thing on top of another. You have VMT, then now you're also still looking at road improvements. It's kind of additive. So what the county did is we kind of looked at kind of our old way of looking at traffic analysis and kind of did a scaled down version, if you will, where we're not studying areas as large as we used to with traffic. We're not really looking at road widening and capacity increasing. We're really focusing more on intersection operational improvements if signals are needed, more access management, those type of operational things that we would review and condition as part of a development project. Because if we were to condition some kind of road widening where you're actually adding capacity to the roadway, that then would also be subject to VMT, the roadway improvement itself. That's the other part of VMT. There's land use and there's transportation. So on the transportation side, if you are widening a road and increasing capacity, you are inducing demand and therefore is subject to VMT. And so therefore it makes any kind of road widening project, whether it's a county project, a Caltrans project, or a developer mitigation project, it makes those type of projects extremely difficult and challenging to construct and build.
Yeah, it's my understanding that this whole thing is being driven by the interest in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I get that, but I think it's short-sighted in the respect that 20 years from now, probably 80% of the cars on the roadway are going to be electric. And that's going to eliminate that, by and large, eliminate that concern. And that electricity is going to be generated by solar and wind and other non carbon-based energy sources, and that's going to mitigate this whole thing. It's going to be a lot. I wish I was going to be here 30 years from now, but at 70, almost 73 years old, that's not likely going to be the case. But I think that's what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to have a tremendous amount of electric vehicles that are not going to be producing carbon dioxide emissions. And so I think this is almost short-sighted. I mean, are they looking out 20, 30 years and realize that the transportation model is going to change dramatically in that length of time?
Well, that's a very good point you make. It's been discussed a lot. So GHG is indirectly part of vehicle miles traveled in SB 743, but GHG is not the metric for VMT. VMT, the metric is how far you're going to average your driving. It's a transportation metric. So you could make the case that if people are driving less, they're reducing GHG, but we're not measuring GHG with VMT and SB 743. It's not a metric, but it is an indirect, it is indirectly related as relates to trying to reduce GHG. And so it is a component, but not a metric under CEQA. Just wanted to clarify that. So for example, an electric car, that doesn't matter. And this has been very controversial. If you have a developer that wants to put in EV charging for every housing development or put in solar panels on the roof, all of those things may help reduce GHG under CEQA, but they do nothing for VMT under CEQA. And so there's a little bit of that disconnect, some may say, because yes, I think that, in the future, we may be driving more electric vehicles and our GHG reductions regionally and statewide may be moving towards meeting our state climate action goals. But for VMT, unless the legislation changes, those things will not be directly related to mitigation for VMT, not yet.
Wow, that almost seems crazy. I wonder sometimes about the people in Sacramento that are making these laws and what they've been smoking. I mean, this is way out there, and unfortunately, it's going to negatively impact Spring Valley, and it's not fair. And I'm going to oppose it as long as I can. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. John Eugenio.
Okay, one of your slides showed that there was 680 housing units for Spring Valley. Was that correct?
That was correct. There we go.
And one of your other slides shows 100% affordable housing.
Correct.
That's correct?
Correct.
I'd like the definition of affordable housing.
So the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, they came out with a technical advisory for VMT. They've come out with several updates in 2013, 2016, and 2018 being the last update. And what they did is they kind of came up with certain substantial evidence for screening out different things for VMT. They did the analysis related to that 15% below the regional average. That was related to analysis they did related to the state's climate action goals. They did analysis on small projects, what would qualify as a small project for VMT, and then 100% affordable. They identified 100% affordable as not being subject to VMT, and they provided some evidence in the technical advisory. A couple things is, one, affordable housing projects from a trip generation, they generate less trips than market rate housing. That's one reason. But the state kind of provided, other criteria, and the county has criteria that the county identifies as what is affordable housing with the AMI, whether it's 80%. The county has that criteria. So that criteria in the county would be how you would define what's considered affordable within that criteria. But as far as VMT and the evidence provided by the state, which is what we are adopting as part of our guide, essentially adopting what the state did, is we're relying on the state's advisory document and the evidence they provided for 100% affordable not being subject to VMT.
Well, I'm kind of concerned about that affordable housing, because I live in a neighborhood that used to be affordable. A house down the street for me sold for $1.2 million. Couldn't believe it. And I don't think that house sold in the 70s for $40,000.
Yeah.
That's not very affordable.
Yeah, and the county has another effort that's, again, there's a lot of, we can't keep up with the state these days at the county with all the legislation and things they're rolling out, but we're also looking at inclusionary housing, those type of things, and there's a group that's studying all of this, and then seeing how we, by right development, things like that, and seeing how that fits in with VMT and affordable housing in these areas.
Yeah.
Trying to line these things up, but that's a very good question. But the best I can give you is
That's okay, I understand. But those people in Sacramento, they do not live in affordable housing. Not a one of them. I doubt even the people working there live in affordable housing. Out of Sacramento. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, John. Hey, Jacob, so you get a new TSG, hopefully goes through the board in August. What's the likelihood of it being challenged in court again?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question, Tim. I have to be honest. I mean, there is a lot of the folks out there that, for whatever reason, have really put the county in the spotlight for this. It's really interesting because we did a benchmarking. We looked at every single county in the state, all 58. And we looked at what every single county is doing to implement this legislation. And we did a benchmarking, and it varies. They're all over the state. Some counties, unincorporated counties, are using state guidance. Some are coming up with their own guidance, and they're deviating from state guidance and providing their own substantial evidence. Some incorporated counties are saying, well, just leave it up to each project and developer to figure it out on their own. But for whatever reason, we've kind of found ourselves in the spotlight in the county, and I think it's kind of put us in the crosshairs, if you will. I think of the folks that are really kind of looking at VMT and litigation on both sides of it. You got a lot of folks on the housing side and the building industry that are very concerned, and then you have a lot of folks on the environmental side that are concerned if you deviate from the state guidance as it relates to climate action plans and GHG reductions. What I would say is that the one area that we did deviate from the state guidance is the infill analysis. That was something that the county did based on the board's direction to look at some other way to analyze VMT, to try to find some balance, because as you saw, there's not many VMT efficient areas, to see if there was another way to meet the intent of the legislation, but find some balance. And that is a deviation from the state guidance. And I'm sure there's a likelihood that some folks are going to be very interested in trying to poke holes in that. Let's put it that way.
How much time was lost through the last litigation cycle?
2 years.
2 years. Okay. It's good to know. Is there any other questions from the group or from the public? I don't see any hands up. So I think that's going to be it. Jacob, you did a great job. Thank you very much.
My
Yeah,
pleasure.
when I first saw that map with Spring Valley, I go like, I don't know why you just didn't paint it one color from border to border and be done with it.
Yeah. Well, I can say we have everything docketed for the Planning Commission. That's on our website. It's 300 and something pages. I'm sure everyone's gonna read all of it. But I think the Planning Commission is going to be the a good forum. There'll be a lot of questions, and then as I mentioned, we'll be going to the board in August, and this has just been an incredible journey on looking at and trying to implement state legislation within the kind of unique characteristics of the county, and we'll see how it continues to play out. But I appreciate having the time to, those are all very good questions, and what are the concerns and what does this all mean for your community? So I hope you all stay engaged, and this isn't going to go away. I'll just conclude with saying that we're also being asked by the board to look at fee programs related to VMT, a mitigation fee program, which is going to be a 2 to 3 year effort, but that's where developers could pay fees, and those fees go towards kind of like our traffic impact fees, but instead of going towards road improvements, they would go towards helping with transit investments and other multimodal facilities to help encourage other options that for folks other than driving. So that is something we're moving forward with over the next 2 years. So you'll probably hear about that, but don't confuse it with the Sandag proposal for the road user tax, which was a very controversial thing. And we kept getting pulled into that whole thing with the regional transportation plan, and that's completely separate. But with that being said, the board is asking us to look at mitigation programs, and we'll be continue to do that. So we'll be working on this for a while.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and we'll have you back for an update maybe after the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors vote. Sound good?
Absolutely. Be my pleasure.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys, I'm going to bring the agenda back up again. Next item on the agenda, action item number 2. Mitch Levy, code enforcement with PDS, is with us tonight. Mitch is going to discuss caseload, backlog, and a general update on code enforcement here in the Spring Valley area. Mitch, I'm going to stop sharing. Do you have something to share on the screen? I know Mitch is there. There he is. You have a little trouble connecting? Yeah, you're muted too, or it says you're unmuted, but I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Ooh, that was scary. I'm used to Teams. We don't use Zoom at the office, so I'm glad this is working. I do have a presentation to share. I also have Vanessa Posh with me. She's a planning manager. So I'll answer specific questions about Spring Valley. And if there's any questions about regulatory or zoning ordinances, she can address those.
Okay, great. And I did not make, Vanessa, I don't have you as a co-host, but you're probably not going to have any presentation materials, are you?
Nope, not today.
Okay. So
Thank you.
Mitch, you can go ahead. Thanks, Vanessa.
And can you see my screen?
Absolutely.
All right. So I've been in the county for 20 years. I've been with planning and development code enforcement for 5. I've been in Spring Valley now for about 2 years. Some of the issues that we are dealing with currently is staffing. Currently, we have 10 general code enforcement officers, 1 noise officer, 1 grading officer, and a civil engineer to deal with grading. And then we have an officer who deals with encampments and marijuana dispensaries. The overall statistics for the county unincorporated areas, there's been 4,100 complaints, 2,600 cases opened. Not every complaint is open case. Sometimes it's not a violation. Sometimes we get duplicate complaints. Of those cases open, 2,700 have been closed, and this is for the last fiscal year. Those 10 officers have done 7,100 site inspections. 91% have been voluntarily closed with compliance from the property owner. That's always our first goal. And 61% of the cases closed are within 12 months. Not all cases are easy to close. A building violation from beginning to end, through the time they get a notice, apply for a permit, go through the permit process, and go through the inspection process till the project is finalized, can literally take well over a year, sometimes more than that. So not every case is closed within 12 months. We don't close the case until that project has been finalized. Major use permits can take multiple years, and there are other issues. It's just very time consuming. In Spring Valley, we get 15% of the complaints for the county. So the total amount of complaints we've gotten was 504. We opened 400 of those cases. 430 have been closed. Again, remember, not everyone is closed over the 12-month period. And I did a little over 1,000 site inspections last year with 90% voluntary compliance. And then somebody asked a question about how many backlog cases we have. We have 113 backlog cases in Spring Valley. For code enforcement, a backlog case is anything that's been open before July of 2016. Again, not every case is easy to close. Sometimes when you're dealing with a building violation, there's only so much we can do. We can issue citations, we can issue civil penalties. We can put a notice of violation on the property. And just sometimes we come to a dead end where we can't do any more. So what that notice of violation does is it flags this property. It's recorded with the county's assessor's records. And then anybody who looks that up, there's gonna be a blemish on that title, and that violation will need to be taken care of before the property can be sold, transferred, financed. And so sometimes you can just come to an end of the road where you can't do anymore. And that's why we have backlog cases. We've done all we can, and we revisit that every once in a while to see where it is. Just not every case can be closed. And so we have 113 of those in Spring Valley. Spring Valley update. We recently have added a second enforcement officer. I was the only one. I handled all of Spring Valley, National City, Chula Vista, La Mesa, Bonita. I have recently given up all the outlying areas. I've given up La Mesa, National City, Bonita, Chula Vista, and I've given up a good portion of Spring Valley. So everything south of Hampshire Road will now be handled by Cassandra Amador. So we split up Spring Valley, and we can do a little bit more active enforcement here. And now that I don't have such a caseload coming in, that was a weight off my shoulder. I went from having 200 cases to 130, which is much more manageable. I'm no longer getting 8 to 10 new cases a week. I'm getting a much more easier caseload to deal with, which allows me to address a lot of the violations I'm getting. Another update is at this point, we have 0 open unpermitted pot shops. There is not one in Spring Valley that we haven't dealt with. That was a major learning curve, how to deal with them. It was a case of whack-a-mole. We kept trying different things to get it to happen. If you can close them down, they can move 2 doors down. You have to start all over. They can change ownership of the property just by doing a quick claim deed, and we had to start the whole process over. So we came up with a strategy finally that seems to be working, and we'll keep on that. We work in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney. It's been very effective up till now. What do we enforce? We enforce county zoning ordinances and parts of the county regulatory ordinances. Some of the things that we do enforce would be inoperable vehicles. And inoperable vehicles is any vehicle that's not operable. It's just what it says. We don't regulate ugly. We don't regulate if it's licensed, if it's registered, if it's insured. It's will that vehicle start? Will it move forward? And will it move back? Then little things like, does it have a windshield? It has to be operable where it can be taken on the road, even if it's not to the condition where it can be driven on the road pretty much. But as long as it's operable, we don't regulate it. Again, we don't regulate ugly, and I wish we did. Solid waste is trash on a property. But solid waste is not just trash. Solid waste is pretty much anything that shouldn't be outdoors. So when someone says this is not trash, it's not garbage, it has a value to me, if it's not something that's meant to be outdoors, barbecue equipment, lawn furniture, decorative lawn equipment, garden potteries and whatnot, then it needs to be stored in a legal permitted structure. It's just a catch-all solid waste, but again, zoning ordinance says that if it's not solid waste, it needs to be stored indoor inside a legal permitted structure. Unpermitted structures are just what it says. People build them day and night. They add on to the houses. Spring Valley seems to be a hotbed of people building unpermitted ADUs. And Spring Valley seems to love to convert their garages into junior ADUs without permits. It's probably one of the higher building violations that I get is unpermitted garage conversions. The county is working really hard to get these permitted as quick as we can. We made it as easy as we can. We waived a lot of fees. We actually have plans available for someone who wants to build an ADU, so they don't have to go through the whole process. But it still needs to go through the process. Not easy for laymen to do. We've made it easier. But again, garage conversions are a big deal in Spring Valley. Again, the unpermitted conversions, people are ingenious. The one on the right is a train car. The one on the left is cargo containers. People have started converting these into rental units. And I'm shocking at what people will rent nowadays. People who are pretty ingenious when they're looking to get around some of the ordinances that we have. Occupied trailers. So the ordinance says you're allowed to have one trailer on your property in full storage mode and not occupied. So full storage mode means it can't be attached to any utilities. The awnings need to be pulled in, the pop-outs need to be pulled in, the stairs need to be pulled in. It literally has to be kept in the term storage mode, so you can back up a vehicle, attach it, and pull it away. Can't be occupied. There is one caveat to that. There's something called a temporary healthcare trailer. So if the person living in the dwelling or the person living in the trailer needs medical attention, medical care, they can get a doctor's note and apply for a temporary healthcare permit for that trailer. It's good for 1 year. After the doctor's note comes in, building inspector will go out and take a look at it. They have to submit a plot plan, a few other things. Fairly simple to do. A building inspector come out, make sure it's hooked up to electrical, water correctly. The septic is being taken care of. If you do get a temporary healthcare permit, again, it's good for 1 year. The second year, you get a easy one. Once you get a doctor's note, I think it's $35 to renew that. As long as you can get those doctor's notes, then you can keep renewing that temporary healthcare permit. Once there is a temporary healthcare trailer on the property, you're allowed to store one additional trailer on your property. So that would be the caveat to only one trailer on the property. With a temporary healthcare permit, you could have a second one on the property in full storage mode, can't be occupied. Your kids can't play in it. You can't store things in it. It's just there on your property waiting to be used. Unpermitted property uses. There are zoning ordinances that say what you can do on a property and what you can't do on a property. One of the cases I have now that most of you probably are familiar with is 8622 Troy Street, the gym that's at the corner of Troy and Sweetwater. It's a gym in a commercial zone, zone C36, which means you can't have a residence on that property unless it's a secondary use to the primary use. So in this case, on Troy Street, there are actually two small dwellings on it. Above the gym, there's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. And then to the side of it, there's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, is how it was built. Those two units could house staff for the gym, security for the gym, management for the gym, as long as it's secondary use to the primary use. So that property on Troy Street, the gym, had no established primary use at this point for commercial, which is how I was able to get it down from 57 people that were renting it as a group residential, which again is not a permitted use in a C36, down to 3. And now we're working with the property owner to evict those last 3. But again, that was an unpermitted use for that zone, C36, not to be used for residential. Cannabis, again, we've kept up on this really well. It was a game of whack-a-mole. We started boarding them up, disconnecting the utilities, and requiring all kinds of tenant improvements, including site plans and site plan approvals, which has been a tremendous way in keeping these closed. And we've worked through that pretty significantly well at this point. Homeless encampments, any homeless encampment on private property, code enforcement will deal with. This was a homeless encampment off of the swap meet. It's kind of interesting, that whole strip of land behind the swap meet, most of that is on private property. These properties up on the hillside, their parcel lines go all the ways into the canyon. So even though this is a county easement used for recreational purposes, private property were responsible for cleaning these homeless encampments. It took a lot of effort when Hep A came up. It became a high priority. And so this is one of the things that we do address. As long as it's on private property, we will deal with it. And we usually work with the Sheriff's Department and PERT team and a few others to give them outreach to move them. And then we require the property owners to clean them up. During Hep A, if the property owners didn't jump on it very quickly, we abated those properties at a significant cost that became an encumbrance on the property owner's property. Grading violations, we have an officer and an engineer who deals with that. A grading violation is any time more than 200 cubic yards of dirt is either taken onto the property or off the property. It's a significant amount of dirt. It's about about 30 dump truck loads of dirt coming in or out. Once that amount of dirt is removed, it becomes a real burden on the property owner to revert it back. If they need to, once there's a grading violation, they need to get a permit to put it back the way it was. So if they remove dirt off the property, they need to get a permit, engineers involved to put it back on. If they put it on, then again, they're gonna need to get a permit and engineers involved to put it back on. On some of these are significant amount, and it can cost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to rectify some of these major grading violations. Not a quick fix. They do take quite a bit of time. Noise, we have one engineer who handles that, Veronica. A noise violation is anything that's a consistent noise. So in this case, engines, roosters, dogs barking, it has to be a consistent noise. The party that runs all night is not a noise violation. That would be contact the Sheriff's Department. She needs to be able to go out and register the noise and record it and see what level it's at over a 24-hour period, and then divide it by some special formula that she has. So again, it's a chronic noise issue that's continuous, and then Veronica will deal with that. Some of the challenges that we have is there are a lot of safety issues. We're dealing with people who don't want us there. There's a lot of fanatics, the sovereign individuals who see themselves as anti-government, and they see the government as taking away their rights. Some of the safety issues we deal with are animals, rattlesnakes, dogs, diseases, Hep A, COVID. We were on the front line of COVID, and then different vectors. Some of the challenges with human components are we're dealing with people's emotions. We're dealing with reporting parties who want something done, and property owners who sometimes are victims of their own demise. If someone buys a property with a building violation that they're unaware of, and 20 years later, someone comes up and complains about it, when we investigate, they bought that violation. And so we're dealing with a lot of different emotions and I try to stay impartial, and I can usually empathize with both sides of this, and we move it forward with as much empathy as we can. But it's always not an easy thing. Reporting parties want to do as quickly as we can, and property owners just want some help and want some kind of out. Priorities are always shifting. When I talked about earlier, when Hep A hit, hepatitis A, we dealt with the homeless encampments, and that became the highest priority that we had in a long time. Dispensaries for a while were a very high priority, very labor intensive. COVID was a once in a lifetime event. We went from zero to 1 million Nobody knew who was going to handle it, so they looked around and found code enforcement. And we got thousands and thousands of complaints. Every complaint had to be input, had to be investigated, had to be followed up. We were dealing with individuals who did not want to comply with the closure ordinances. And so we became a little bit overwhelmed at that point, just trying to keep up. And COVID was the highest priority. And sometimes when the county decides what our priorities are, other things need to be put on the back burner. Part of the shifting priorities are my own personal complaints. Every once in a while, a complaint will come in that becomes the highest priority. I talked about the one on Troy Street, the gym. That became a highest priority. We have 57 people living in a structure that's commercial, poor ventilation, no alarms, elderly, handicapped, emotionally challenged. And so that became one of the highest priorities I've had. And I babysat that for weeks and weeks. In fact, I'm still going out there working the property owner to evict the last 3, and some squatters have moved in. So we're working with the sheriff's department to try to deal with that. But the priorities are constantly shifting. Sometimes they're mine from call to call. Enforcement tools, when a complaint comes in, we investigate. Code enforcement wants to get out there within 5 days of it coming in. My personal goal are within 1 to 3 days of the complaint coming in. I do work Monday through Thursday, so that would be my time frame. We meet with the owners and educate. Most of these people are not criminals. They didn't know about the ordinances. Some of them, are skirting the ordinances, but most of them are not criminals. We just start with the education. I put them on a compliance schedule to get things done. With a building violation, they have a written compliance schedule. It starts out with hiring somebody to get the work done, submitting plans, applying for a permit, and then there are steps along the way that they need to keep with. I help them facilitate what they need to get done. I have some resources available to me, and I quite often give them guidance. I have some elderly people that I babysit who were hoarders, and I meet with them on a weekly basis and give them a small little goal to achieve for that week. And sometimes when they're not physically or emotionally able to, we have other resources available. We always try for voluntary compliance, always work with the property owner to achieve that. But some of the tools I do have available, I have a criminal citations. I can issue up to $10,000 worth of citations over a 1-year period. The first one's 100, the second one's 200, then 500, and then all subsequent citations are $1,000. I have civil penalties if those don't work, which can be up to $50,000 per year. It's a daily penalty. That notice of violation, if we get to a point where nothing's working, we can put a notice of violation on the property and record that. It will stop them from doing anything with that property financially to sell it or refinance it until that notice of violation is taken care of. And then last case scenario, we have a court order abatement. If someone can't clean up their property, if they can't remove the inoperable vehicles, if they won't remove the graffiti, again, that's a big thing in Spring Valley is graffiti abatement. Then we will be able to abate the property, go to court and present our case on why things aren't moving forward. There is a caveat to the court order abatement. There are certain things that you just can't do that with. If a building is built without permits and it's habitable, if it's an addition, most courts are not going to let us take down an occupied building, and they're not going to allow us to remove trailers on a property that are occupied. Not now. It's a tough situation. How do I file a complaint? The best way, my suggestion, is this phone number. It's a 24-hour hotline. There's somebody there 24/7. They'll take the complaint, let us know specifically what the violation is, the address if you have it, or the APN, one of those two things. And then your information, you stay confidential. It's just that sometimes people calling complaint is not as obvious as they think it is, and we can't find it. So please always leave your information. That's the best way to go. Again, it's 24/7. And then we do have it an email down here. But I would strongly recommend the phone number is probably the best way to get a hold of us. And again, there's a bank of operators who will take that complaint and send it to us. Try to be very specific because we only deal with the violation as called in. We're not proactive, we're reactive, and there's so many reasons for that. As you saw my caseload, we can't keep up with the complaints. It's one of the reasons that we're not proactive. We also never cross the line where we can be accused of favoritism or anything else, because we're just handling complaints as they come in. So be very specific about what it is you like to address, and we'll adjust those. And so at this point, any questions?
Yeah, Laura, go ahead. Laura, you may, there you go.
I couldn't get it to unmute. Along Bancroft Drive, from Olive Drive down to the park, there is half of that area is a tow truck storage, I guess, but I'm sure they're not zoned to do that outside there. But also it's right along the creek, which is a pollution hazard for wrecked cars and such as that to be stored on the property. But it's also on the easement right next to the sidewalk. All along there's all we see are these towed vehicles. The only thing up there is a guy with a sign that has a phone number to get it towed. Now I know Jesse Robles, who does our code enforcement assistance to the county, he has gotten absolutely no ability to get any county person to help with that. Now he's made his try, we make our tries, but it seems to fall down somewhere in the county, and I don't know where that might be. Also, there's a gentleman, I can't remember his name now, and John probably would remember, on Troy Street, who has a recycling place. And he's had it since the 80s, and we've talked to him, and he didn't understand any reason why anybody should not like it, but he has a way to, supposedly at a time, to move cars in and around and out because Troy Street gets very busy, but now he's gone back on his word on that. And it's very dangerous now with people scooting in and out with the recycling, but it also uses for noise abatement. He's used, and I guess been approved, I don't know, because I talked to the county guy there and he said, oh no, that's not good. Insulated garage door panels. And I would like it if you could possibly do something about that. Or find somebody who would want to do something about that.
It's interesting that you brought that up. I actually have a case open at it's 3270 Bancroft. It's right there on the corner of Olive. That property has a very unique zoning. It's zoned C32, which has a very limited use. And one of those, and none of those uses have anything to do with auto repair or storage of vehicles or tow yards. And so I am working on that property right now. It's not gonna be a quick fix. Some of what they're saying is that property is legal non-conforming, or in layman's term, grandfathered in because it's been there so long. And
no, the tow company is not. The other part is because it has been there for half of forever. But the tow truck business is only recently been there for a year or two.
So almost none of that should be there. And just because a company changes hands, if it's been continuous use for storing vehicles or mechanics or whatnot, it can continue to use that. But the extent of what's happening there is not allowed, and I'm working with that. It's again, not going to be a quick fix. That's a real project on that property. All the vehicles that are on there should be gone. The easement, they should be removed. Again, not going to be quick. The owner is fighting that, but I am moving forward on that one. I've been aware of it for quite a while, and recently someone called it in. In fact, it may be somebody on this call. I think it might have been Chris Pierce. And so I am working on that property. He called in as storing inoperable vehicles, which is definitely not allowable use. But as I started researching it, that was some type of a newspaper years ago. And so if it's not grandfathered in before the zoning changed and it can't stay there, the tow yard business can be there. They can't bring in their vehicles. But again, on C32, it can't be there. So I am working on that property. It is a project and it's going to take a little while.
But it sounded like from your explanation of what you do and stuff, that in effect, at the end, you're not able to do anything and nobody matters. And nothing will be corrected in actuality. If the person says, no, I'm not gonna,
see,
what happens?
And so I have resources available to me, the citations, the civil penalties. The abatement's probably not going to happen. So I do have things available to me that we are moving forward on. The problem is, or one of the issues I have is a time frame, is we have to give the property owner due process and the right to question what we're doing and appeals and work with the county to change certain things. And so there is a time frame issue going on here, but I am working with it and we'll make this happen. It's just a matter of how quickly we can make that happen. The
Well,
recycling facility on Troy Street, they've actually lost the license and we are working to close them down. We're not renewing their license.
He was an old codger, but he was probably one of those, it's my right to be here. And he had told me that a couple times. I said, yes, sir, but you can't have batteries on the ground leaking like that. And you can't have that like that. And he just kind of, it's my right, it's my property. And I understand that you have people like that, probably more than we'd like to know. But Jesse has tried his best to try to get the county to do stuff. We have a point person who tries to filter stuff into you, and yet we still can't get any push. So do you have any clues as to how we might be able to get some actual action from the county?
We are getting action on that one. Again, we're not renewing his permit, his license to operate a recycling facility. So now it's just a matter of due process. We are moving forward on the recycling facility very quickly, as quick as we can. Again, this is a great country we live in, where people have the right to due process and challenge and fight in courts and lawyers and meetings. And it's a matter of how quickly we can make it happen. But at this point, as far as I'm aware, we are not renewing that permit. It's not happening. And
I understand that the bureaucratic process is difficult, but this has been years. It's years and years and years. I was still working at the fire department the first time I saw that, and I've been retired from them for 25 years. So, it's benign neglect as far as I can see. I don't know.
Not always easy. I have to work within the structure I have and the court system and the legal system and everything else. We have to dot all I's, and it's amazing how long someone can hold off on certain things if they have the wherewithal, the finance, and the manpower to do it. It really is amazing, and not just but we are working forward on that one.
Yeah, we're going to go on to other speakers. John Eugenio.
Hey, Mitch, thanks for the presentation. Very well done.
Thank you.
Question I have is, how long does it take to remove an inoperable vehicle from an alleyway? Has no wheels, damaged, pretty much a wreck.
So if it's a county maintained alleyway, it's pretty darn quickly. The DPW will go out there and take it away. If it's not a county maintained alleyway, it now becomes a private property issue. So I have to deal with whoever is leaning closest to that car is now responsible for an alleyway. So
Okay.
and most of the alleyways in Spring Valley are not county maintained, and they are responsible for the private property owner. So if you call that specific alleyway in with the closest property to it, I'll address it with the property owner. It's usually pretty darn quick.
When did that change? Because I thought they were county maintained alleyways, and I heard they were going to revert it back to the property owners, but I didn't know that happened yet.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's as long as I've been here, they've not been county maintained.
Okay.
I can't speak for all alleys. There might be some that are. It's the county has the right to take that. It's kind of a unique situation. It's the county's property, but they're not maintained by the county.
Correct. Okay.
It's a unique situation, and I run into a lot of hostility when I'm talking to some of these property owner and advising them that they have to clean up their alley, move a homeless encampment in the alley, remove inoperable vehicles. In a lot of
Couches
cases,
and chairs.
yeah, in a lot of cases with inoperable vehicles, we will tow it at county expense, code enforcement. We get reimbursed by the state on some types of tows. When there's a major wildfire, when a car burns, we get reimbursed by the state. We use that same fund to remove certain vehicles. In some cases like that, we would do that for them in some cases.
Okay,
It's usually a fairly quick process, matter of a week. or
thank
two.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
have a quick question. This is Tim. Mitch and Vanessa, how does active code processing mesh with permit processing? If a property has outstanding code issues that are not yet resolved, and at the same time they're looking for B waivers or deviations or whatever to the property, how does that work together? Does that make sense?
So when a permit comes in and through the building division, staff will look and see if there are flags that are associated with the property. And as a part of their corrections, they'll ask and let the customer know that, hey, it looks like there's a flag on here for an unpermitted cargo container or an unpermitted addition. You're going to have to address that. So we'll reach out to codes and find out, are these all of the issues, or is, they'll ask exactly what the violations are. And then as a part of the building permit, they'll work with codes. They'll work with, if there's a BRD designator, they'll work with the group on getting a waiver or a site plan approved. So that we kind of all work together at some point. I don't think that one, it's not necessarily the violation is really going to depend on when the owner is ready to address the violation, right? Because like Mitch was saying, if it's occupied space, sometimes it's really hard for owners to come up with the money to permit the whole residence or, get the addition permitted. But usually we all try to work together and find a way that, works for everyone.
Now, the public, and I'm talking also about people considering purchasing property, they have access to the same tools that we do, like the Acela program. So they can go out and look at an APN and they can see that there's violations and maybe negotiate that into their purchasing situation.
Yes,
and
definitely.
Do they know that?
You would be surprised. We get a lot of people because I worked 9 years on the counters. Daily, we had a lot of people coming in calling, hey, I'm about to buy this property. Do you see anything, any flags or any violations? But then we get people in who are like, I already bought this property. I just bought it. And then we have to break them the bad news, be the bearer of bad news. That's like, gosh, I had somebody in there today where the whole house, in a place that you can't even have it, encroaching in all of the major setbacks. I mean, it was a nightmare, and I felt so bad because they already purchased it. It's done, close sale. And as Mitch said, now the new property owner is stuck with the problem.
Is a title insurance company liable for that?
I don't know the legalities of that.
Yeah, it would seem to me that that's why you pay title insurances, so that they can look that up for you. But a lot of this stuff is the public can access it.
And realtors, you would think realtors, professionals are telling their clients, hey, let's look into this before. So one of the biggest things is like when people are calling in and they're like, my realtor said, I'm like, don't always believe your realtor. Come to the county, get your facts here.
Now, if somebody's attempting permits on a piece of property that has code violations, does that accelerate the resolution of the violations?
I wouldn't say that it accelerates it, but we definitely will, depending on the violation. If it's a safety issue, of course, those will always kind of take precedent on any other violations. So some do.
Okay. And just a question back to Mitch, but Vanessa might key in on this, is that if the property is being held in a trust, which a lot of Spring Valley is, does the code violation penalties go all the way back to the property owner or just the resident?
So that's a good question. And sometimes it makes it hard to enforce. It goes back to whoever is listed as the registered property owner with the county assessor's office. So we issue such citations, civil penalties against that trust. And when they're not paid, then it shows up as a lien on that property. And so, but it shows up under the trust name. So if we going after someone for collection, sometimes it's hard to get it from a trust or an LLC, but it does show up as lien on that property. There's a little lag on the time frame of it, but that's who we have to issue our penalties against, is whoever is the registered owner as listed.
Thank you, Mitch. John Eugenio, you still have your hand up. Do you have a further question? Okay, any other members?
Mitch, I just want to let you know you're still sharing in case there's PII information.
Might be good stuff, Chris.
I don't think that's us, though.
No, Mitch, you can stop sharing at the bottom.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and stop him. I stopped him.
Okay.
I think there was a member of the public. Tom, is that you? You're muted.
Yes, that's me. I just wanted to really quick ask about the code enforcement's ability to manage cars that are parked in the streets that do not have street parking. I know that we had some discussion on here with the police, and they seem to the sheriff department kind of seems to stay away. They seem to push it on to the California, the highway patrol, and it seems to kind of go back and forth. The reason I ask is because sometimes my street is to the point where both sides are parked on to the point where, trash trucks can't get through. So I just wanted to see if you have anything to say about that. Thank you.
So from a code enforcement standpoint, my power ends at the end of private property. Once it gets to public property, I have no enforcement power. I literally have people who have 2 trailer coaches on the property, push one out onto the street, if it's operable or not, and that ends my enforcement power. At that point, it becomes a CHP issue. I hate to put it off on them, but that's who we all put it off on, is CHP. I know they have a online website where you can put the information in, and they'll go out and tag it and investigate. But that's all I can do is recommend CHP.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I know it's a tough issue, especially in Spring Valley, especially in my area. But thanks for your input.
It is tough in Spring Valley. It is.
I don't see any other questions from the group or public. So I'm going to thank Mitch certainly for being here. Keep doing your thing. Go out and get some volunteers and pay them a kick them a little money back for each violation they find for you. Okay. That's my recommendation. And Vanessa, thanks for being here again. Both of you guys stay in touch and we'll probably talk down the road. All right.
Absolutely. Have a good night, all.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for having me. It was good to put a face with some of the names I've been seeing.
Definitely. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mitch.
All right. We're going to go down to item 3, which is a pre-intake interview. This is for 645 Grand Avenue, and it's in Spring Valley, APN 584-410-5000. And this is PDS 2019 STP 19013M1. Now, this is a site plan that we approved back in 2019, and the PDS planner asked me if we'd care to do an informal interview, and not necessarily that we will ever get a waiver or minor deviation or anything else from them. They are probably going to process it all in-house because it is already an approved site plan. So keeping that in mind, I asked Scott Harris, or Scott volunteered, I should say, to review it against the site plan, what they want to do. I think they want to add a building, and to kind of discuss it with the group. So Scott, do you have that presentation to share?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to go get it so that I have it up. And it's a PowerPoint, so I'm going to open it up.
What was the cross street there, Tim?
It's Grand and San Francisco, I think, is on the north edge. Like 2 properties up is San Francisco.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's from memory. So just wanted to let you know. All right, let me go full screen here and let me share my screen. Find out where I did with it. Here it goes. Okay, this is the PowerPoint here. Everybody see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. All right, so Scott, if you go ahead and I'll bounce around the frames as you need me to do so.
Okay, what, like Tim had mentioned, he asked me to take a look at the County of San Diego Design Review checklist. And so I went through the 2 projects that were presented, the original project in 2020, and then the project that was submitted recently. The original project 2020 had a big building. The building's now been reduced from what, 50 by 150 to like 36 by 50, with the 50 side being right along the Grand Avenue. And when I was looking at the building and comparing it to the design guidelines, I really found some things that were missing, in my opinion. All it was just a box, and it seems like when you look at the design guidelines, Tim, can we go down to the exterior elevations?
Sorry, that's the lighting. Okay, these here.
Yes, there you are.
Yeah, let me reduce those down a little bit so we can see all 4 of them. Okay.
And so when we look at the exterior elevations, all we're looking at is just a box, an ugly box. And
Sure.
so if we look at the design guidelines, especially item number 13, it talks about needing some shades, some shadows, recesses, offsets, and we don't have any of that.
This, excuse me, Scott, this is going to be a sales office too, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, but our stipulation is that anything over 50 feet, and that's why you see that magic number of 50 feet all the time, right?
Yes, anything over 50 feet. So essentially, he still qualifies for that requirement because he's not over 50 feet. But that, that's a matter of interest.
Is that what they call architectural relief?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, if maybe I should just read what it says in design guidelines, item number 13. Every building provides shade and shadows via offsets, projections, roof overhangs, recesses, and it doesn't have any of that. So I think that's a mistake, that the building should be provided with those things and doesn't. And
right.
Then that was really all I had on the building itself. And then very quickly we go down to the landscape, and one of the comments in the design guidelines required landscaping around the there is a landscape plan, isn't there?
Yeah, on the original site plan,
Yeah.
they just say proposed landscaping.
There you go. That's good enough.
Yeah.
And so we've got what do you call it? A parking lot that's located that was reduced. It used to have like 26 spaces. Now it's been reduced like to 6, and that's fine. You cover the entire lot with parking, and you're spending several $100,000 just on parking itself, and reducing the parking. I think that's fine, but there should be landscaping around the parking as required on the design guidelines, and we didn't have any of that. And then the original plan showed what perimeter landscaping on 4 sides. And now the perimeter landscaping is limited to 2 sides. I talked to the owner and he said he's fine putting landscaping on 4 sides. A really nice guy. Is he here?
I don't think he is.
Really nice guy. Juan, I think his name was.
Leon, maybe, or Leon.
Yeah, I think that was his last name.
Yep. Yeah, I don't see him here this evening.
Okay, but anyway, so the landscaping, in my opinion, we don't have enough information. So that's, you see the landscaping on the bottom. Can you go back down again? But there's nothing on the, there was nothing on the right side, and there's nothing on the top.
Right.
And we needed to have that. So we don't have any identification of the type of plants or the type of sprinklers or anything like that. We really need a full set of landscape plans in order to have a look at this and make a proper review.
Yep. So this brings up the question to the group, is that we have approved a site plan. Now, and some of the more senior people in the group maybe can chime in here, because we have an approved site plan, now the county is letting the property owner kind of pick and choose pieces of that approved site plan and not necessarily follow the whole site plan in its entirety at the same time. Get what I'm saying? As far as fencing or walls or landscaping or anything. And so who knows how many years it's going to go on before we see the realization of the entire site being what you would hope for when you voted for this back in 2019. Okay. And so what I'm trying to encourage is, Scott's taking a hard look at it. He's got this, and everybody's got a copy of this as of today. He's got going through the questions on the design checklist and wondering where in the heck stuff is or why it hasn't been addressed yet, so on and so forth. But the question I have back to the county is if you're just going to allow them to do certain things to run their business and not necessarily to comply with the design guidelines of the Spring Valley Community Planning Group or the planning area, this isn't helping our cause, if you know what I mean. So is that I'm trying not to be inflammatory or anything, but I mean, if he kind of gets to pick and choose what he wants to do based off the site plan and not do everything else on the site plan, why do we bother? I mean, it's nice to have a site plan. We've got something at least we can spring off of,
and we've got design guidelines, and it doesn't look like when the county approved this, they were looking at the design guidelines.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, this was just a courtesy to us from the planner that she allowed us to even look at this. It was going to be something that was done pretty much inside of PDS, and that was going to be it. Scott, I think maybe we just kind of open it up to questions and see if we can get a ball rolling here.
I think so, yeah. That is pretty much everything I wanted to say, other than the fact that the next set of comments were concerning signage, which we didn't receive anything for signage, but it would have been nice to be able to give them some direction as to what we were expecting and what we wanted to see.
Yeah, they don't have any signage right now at all, do they?
No.
No, okay, except for every one of their vehicles is painted with bullet pumping on it, but.
And there's going to be something on the building itself, and there's nothing shown on the plans.
Yeah, and they would have to come to us for that, hopefully, because it never was on a site plan. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't understand why he's going to be allowed to reduce his parking, because the county figures out the amount of parking that's required based on what the business is going to be. And now he's added an additional building, which seems like he's going to need even more parking. Since this is just a PIA kind of thing, maybe we should just make a list of things and send it to both the owner and the county. And I also, yeah, that's problematic. I'd like to see some architectural relief and the parking issue. And as Scott said, the landscape plan seems to have disappeared. Because there
Yeah.
probably was one at the beginning. I'm not sure.
You know, it's funny that I asked the county to produce the site plan that was approved by us, because in those days we were stamping and sending the whole plans back, and all I got was a stamp plan by the director at that time. And Scott, as far as I know, those didn't show any landscaping either, did they?
I don't think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
as far as the reduction in parking is concerned, I'm thinking that has to do with the reduction in the building size. The building size went from like 50 by 120 to 50 by 38. And so with that reduction in building size, they were, I guess, allowed a adequate reduction in parking as well.
So they're not anticipating any people being inside the new building that they want?
The building's only a 1-story, 50 by 38. So
No, the new 2-story building.
no, it's not a 2-story, it's just a 1-story.
I thought it said that on here.
It's pretty high. There's 2nd-story windows, but I talked to the owner and the owner said it's just a 1-story.
Oh, okay. But it is considered a sales building.
Yeah, sales office building, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good point, Laura. Ed Woodruff.
They don't have any lighting on this plan on this either, do they?
They do show some lighting. Let's go to the site plan.
Yeah, because I might have missed it. I managed to.
Is it here?
And no, go up to the main site plan.
Like poles.
Yeah, right there.
Where?
You've got 2 along the back, 2 along the top, 2 along the.
Okay, I just
bottom.
missed them, I guess.
Yeah.
And Tim, I didn't think in the past they haven't been able to pick and choose. There was things you had to do. It was listed, and if you didn't, then it wasn't approved. And this pick and choose things, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever. I don't remember.
Well, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. The owner wasn't talking about the walls going up, and it's going to be a masonry concrete brick wall of a certain height, and he didn't talk about any landscaping plans. All he talked about was the building, correct?
Well, we talked about the fence. There's a 8-foot high block fence that's proposed surrounding the site.
And is that going to happen in concert with the building?
You know, when it happens, we didn't talk about when stuff happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of answer your question, Ed?
It does, yeah. It certainly does. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Jim Custo.
Yeah, I see future code enforcement issues here. It seems absolutely, number one, if that's a 1-story building, they must be getting ready to play basketball inside of it. That doesn't make any sense at all with those extra sets of windows. That's got all the earmarkings of 2 stories. Sorry about
unless it's a very large bay there as well, and because they're a concrete pumper. Is that correct, Scott? They pump concrete?
That's my understanding, yeah.
That they could raise the boom inside the building to do maintenance on the trucks.
Well, wait a minute. This is supposed to be a sales office, not a repair building, right?
Yeah. Why would you have
So
it?
I'm not seeing any bay doors where you could bring equipment in at all.
Thank you.
This is completely crazy. I fully believe that they have to be held to the original site plan and build it as it was designed, or develop a new site plan with all this new stuff, with all the requirements met as have been spelled out by Scott that are missing. And otherwise, we're gonna fight this thing tooth and nail. At least I will. I won't approve it.
I wouldn't either. Mm-mm.
Well, see, that's one of the issues is right now we're really not in the approval cycle.
That's right.
True.
And
so they're just gonna be able to build this So we need to say, fire a letter off to the county saying, hey, this is egregious.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a minor thing.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just way out of line here.
Good. Yeah, and I can contact back this who's a fairly new person, like everybody else is working there right now, and have a conversation with her about how do we get to a point where we can protest this and get some discussion going, even if we have the planner and or the planning manager, whoever that person may be, to come on board at a meeting and to explain why they're letting this happen. Okay.
Because would this go into their quick checklist thing type deal? Because it looks to me like they're just going to go right on by it.
I think so. I think it's something very similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, and it's amazing that she even extended it as a courtesy by contacting me.
You even got this.
Yeah, which is kind of like opening a Pandora's box, if you know what I mean, because that gives us an opportunity to say, like Jim is saying, this is crazy, and we need to be in the game on this, because quite honestly, we approved this thing back in 2019. So anything that goes wrong with it, people can come to us and say, public included, what's wrong with you, planning group? You guys approved this, and now look what's going on. Okay.
Tim or Scott, either one, when you look at this, when you look at the new building, does it appear to you to be right up against the original building? When you look at the site plan there, see right there that there seems to be a walkway to go into this sales building, but doesn't it look like the new building is attached to the old building?
I think the old building's going away, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah, the old building's not on this plan anymore.
The whole old building? I thought
The
it
whole
was just,
thing's, oh, okay.
The old building's gone, yes.
oh, they weren't making it smaller.
No.
Okay,
The old building was metal, the new building's masonry.
okay.
I see.
Cool.
Still, I don't think.
Jim, did you have any other question?
No, that pretty well takes care of it for me. I thought I'd seen everything, but clearly that's not the case.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because this was the first site plan that I ever worked on. This was in, I think, July or August of 2019. I remember the guy, he was talking great things about it and the need for the wall for security. And if you guys recall him coming to the meeting, I think he was there with a spouse, and he was really congenial and talking about a lot of stuff. And, here it is 3 years later, and nothing has happened except that, he just wants to get this sales office built in there. That's about it. And we really need to come back and say, you'd be working on the other that Spring Valley.
It's the old bait and switch technique, I mean, we've already been down this path with that car repair facility converted to adult daycare, and and we said, hey, this isn't going to fly, and they were doing construction anyway, and we called code enforcement. And, this is the same kind of, it doesn't make any sense that you can get a site plan and then basically throw everything off the table, still use the shell of that site plan, which is, I guess, the perimeter of the property, and put up whatever the hell you want inside of it.
It's all different.
Okay. And check, I just rolled through the meeting roster here to see if Vanessa was still on board. And she is not, because that would be a great question to put to her, is to say, why is this allowed to happen? So we'll put together some talk points, send them around the group for a quick review, and I will get back to this planner and see if we can go upstairs to their boss as well and find out why the site plan is not being executed. Sound good?
Yeah, it
good.
seems odd that they're going to have all this empty space now. What were
Well, they have equipment parked out there.
Is that zoned for open storage of equipment?
In a sense of what? It's C36, like everything else out there.
A lot of C36 is not zoned for that. That's the problem we have with the place on Bancroft.
Right. And do you to give the owner credit, I think this was originally a dumpster storage facility. Scott, is that?
I don't
what it
know what
appeared
it originally was. I don't know.
Yeah, it looked terrible from the aerial view. I don't know what they were storing. It was either that or porta potties or something. So it's cleaned up to the point where it's like sterile. But the thing is that what's going on with landscaping and the wall and the wall was a big thing for him back in 2019, and now it's like when he gets around to it.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they tried to put in another floor inside that building.
Something, because what are you going to do? 26 feet?
Yeah, I mean that's high.
Yeah.
But my question was, how do you operate the windows that are on the second floor?
Yeah, exactly.
Long arms.
Very carefully.
Very long.
Plus you have
Trampolines.
no way to get to that back part of the property.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if they enter or exit from the alley. Did you get that impression, Scott, that they use the alley?
No, the building's only, the lot is what, 200 feet deep or so, and the building's only like 35. And so there's lots of area. Oh, you mean, do they have a driveway around the back? I don't think so.
I don't think they do either. So everything is done out the front.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, they're gonna have a parking lot.
Yeah.
Right.
For
You see
those
the big
buildings, but still
door
there's
there in
that
front?
space in the back.
Right. All right. So I think that's kind of the plan. We don't have anything to vote on. But I'll start with the planner. I'm going to put a list of things together that we can toss back at them and see if we can go from there and get a conversation with them maybe in the next meeting or so about why we're not being included in this and why the site plan is not being followed. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yep. And maybe we can get the owner to come.
Yeah, he was invited.
Yeah.
So, all right, I am going to go back to the agenda. We have our favorite subject here, number 4, continuance of teleconferencing meeting option pursuant to government code 54953E. And this is again to extend it out to 30 days. I'm not getting a lot of pushback from the county on going back to face-to-face meetings. I am getting a lot of, gee, great, you got Zoom meetings, so we can do that from home or whatever, because the county employees are not back full-time either at PDS, ROV, or any of the other departments up on Overland. So
Can I
with
make that motion, Tim? Make that motion.
Second.
Okay, so let's go ahead. Tiffany, if you would, go down the roster. What's your motion, by the way, Laura?
To continue having Zoom meetings for the next 30 days.
Gotcha. And people, we will go back to face. It's just that oh yeah, and you too, Laura. And but I'm not receiving a whole lot of push from the county or from PDS employees, et cetera, to get it done right away. And to some degree, the original purpose behind the teleconferencing meetings still exists, if you know what I mean. That there are still COVID situations going on out there. The county, the state bouncing back and forth with masking, social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. And I heard a funny joke about people in Norway, by the way, that they're really glad that the Norwegian government stopped the 2-meter distancing rule, because Norwegians are used to 5 meters. Let that sink in. Okay. And I believe that's true. All right. So Lori, you have a motion. Who is the second?
Scott.
Me,
Scott
Schaefer.
Scott Schaefer. So Tiffany, if you go down the roster.
Sure thing. I vote yes. Laura,
Yes.
Jesse,
Yes.
Chris Pierce,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Scott Harris.
No, I want an option.
All right, Scott Schaefer,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Chris Pearson,
No, I'm zoomed out.
Jim,
No, also zoomed out.
Victoria's absent, Ed,
Yes.
Bob is absent, and Tim.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 10 in favor, 3 opposed, and 2 absent. So that carries.
All right. So let's go to Tiffany. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can bring up the minutes from the 28th.
Just a second.
Oh, not a problem.
This is Jim Costello. I'll move to approve as presented tonight.
I'll second that motion.
When we get around to making a motion.
You are 12 steps ahead of me. Let's see.
Thanks for the changes.
There we go. All right, let me share it real quick for those who want to take a peek. There we go.
Oh, can you back up a minute, Tiffany?
Yes.
Was the, were the signs on Broadway, was that pre-intake? Because we voted on it, I thought. No?
No,
Okay,
it was,
great. Thank you.
it's pre-intake.
No vote, no vote.
I had to leave a little bit early because I'm having some pain issues, so thank you.
Okay, if there's no questions, do you want me to run through the vote, Tim?
Please. Thank you.
Okay, I vote yes. Laura,
Yes.
Jesse,
Yes.
Chris Pierce,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Scott Harris,
Yes.
Scott Schaefer,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Chris Pearson,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
no worries. Victoria absent, Ed,
Yes.
Bob absent, and Tim.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes 13 in favor and 2 absent.
Thank you. Is there any announcements from the group? Don't chime in all at once. Tiffany, do you have your hand raised?
I do. I'm gonna plug it into the chat, but as our chair mentioned, we did post our recorded meeting on YouTube. So we created a YouTube channel for the planning group. If there's any other stuff we want to post, I guess we could. But that's where they'll be able to be accessed by the public and any planning group members that want to live this over again and again. They will be there on YouTube for you. So I'll post that in the chat in a bit here. And I think if you just go to YouTube and search for Spring Valley Community Planning Group, we might come up. We have a channel now.
Right now, we have 0 views and my theatrical agent is not happy. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Tiffany. Hey, that was a lot of work to put that out on YouTube. That was not easy. And I appreciate you doing it. Thanks again. Any other hands up for comment? All right, let's go. Announcement. Let's go on to reports. The chair, I sent you all the slideshow from the graffiti meeting that was this week. I understand those are being very lightly attended. I had 3 people that were not county employees at the meeting. The county is changing the rules, so they do not punish the property owners anymore, or they will in the future once they get this voted in, as far as being cited for having graffiti on their property. So that's a big change, and it's a positive one. And I sent you the slideshow, and I believe that's delineated in the slides. So you get a look at that. The 9-sign project that we pre-intaked has now become live. It's a B waiver request. I believe I've sent that to Laura and Jesse has confirmed that he's got that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that maybe we'll get to vote on this at the next meeting. Sound good? If you have any presentation suggestions, forward them to me and I'll track down who we can have to talk about it. And examples tonight was both Jacob and the infill discussion, and Mitch Levy and specifics on Spring Valley for code enforcement. So I'm trying to follow up as you guys feed me suggestions and see if we can get those people to come on board for a presentation. Tiffany's going to go out on leave. Tiffany, you don't have an exact idea, but it's this fall, correct?
Oh, thank you, Tim. Yes. So yeah, I'll be taking a leave of absence come fall. And in preparation for that, instead of having a random date hanging in the air, the last date that I will be able to take minutes for our group is the first meeting in August. So for that second meeting and then on, we'll need someone to take minutes.
Okay, so we would need a volunteer to do this. And so if you guys would do a little soul searching and then contact me to volunteer, that would be great. You don't necessarily have to emulate the recording process if you don't wish to. You can go back to doing it the old-fashioned way, like Jim used to, and I did a couple times last year, and John and Scott and everybody else who has been secretary. So if anybody wishes to volunteer, just go ahead and contact me, and we'll get you set up so that you can relieve Tiffany for that duration. Sound good? All right. So I think I sent out to everybody the pickup drop-off map from Sparrow Academy in La Mesa. I sent it as an email. Please check your emails. I was pondering this whole school pickup and drop-off situation in Spring Valley, and the Sparrow Academy had already figured out how to do it. They use designated lanes inside their own property to pick up certain classes of students. And so if you guys take a look at that, otherwise you can go out to the Sparrow Academy's website, the one in La Mesa again. I think, Jim, it's part of the Seventh Adventist Church property. You're muted, Jim. Still muted. But I think that's the property. But please either look at my email or go to their website, because we're still working to get somebody through TAC maybe with the CHP to come on board. And I really would like to share that with them because it looks like a very logical way to handle it. That's it for Chair. How about CSA 128? Any input from CSA 128?
The last meeting was canceled. Not a quorum.
Not a quorum. Okay, thank you. Jim, Traffic Advisory Council.
No report, nothing going on.
Okay. And then finally, John, you're working on your application?
No, I received the encroachment permits today. I still haven't responded back to Sandra that I did receive them. I need to do that. And then I'll be gone here for the next week or so. And when I get back, I'll be try to schedule some cleanup dates.
Excellent. Thank you very much. No new projects, although we do have now that Broadway / Campo Road mini mall with the 9 signs that is going to be worked on between now and whatever meeting we can schedule it for. But other than that, no new projects, very slow. And our next meeting is July 26th, 2022. And any other questions or comments? Otherwise, Laura?
Yeah, since Tiffany's gonna be off, there are specific regulations in our procedures about the amount of time someone can be off. So since we know what it's gonna be, I would like to maybe, we can't, I guess, do a motion, but maybe consider that we will accept that Tiffany's gonna be off for a certain amount of time and her place will be covered by one of the members. Is that
Oh,
all right?
should I put it on we've got 2 meetings before that happens, so I can put it on as an action item to vote on it?
Well, I
Yep.
don't know if we really need to do that, but maybe we should, but I don't want to.
Well, there have been times where, like, for example, Scott Schaefer was on duty, and so I covered for secretary. And that was just, I made the announcement that I'm going to be secretary, and that's the way it's going to be. And I think the same thing is true with Tiffany being out, because we anticipate and hope very much that she comes back, right, Tiffany? And at that point, we'll just welcome her back in, and the replacement can go back to doing whatever they were doing.
Yeah, I think as long as everybody's aware and nobody can start going, well, where is she? Somebody said something to me when I wasn't there.
Well, I mean,
but as long as we all know, and I think it's fine. For me, it is.
Good. Okay. Any others, comments, questions, last thoughts? Other than that, I'm going to say we're going to adjourn at 9 minutes after 9, and we'll see you all on the 26th. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, thank you.
Good night, everyone. See you.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night. See you.